Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day, everybody. Welcome to the world's largest startup community, which means Startup Grind. Our aim is to change the world one startup at a time. And are we going to do this? We see it as our mission to give companies, small, big, and not so big, everywhere, the education and the opportunities they need to build, grow, and scale their companies. And we inflict or impose ourselves some values, which are that we believe in making friends, not contacts. We believe in giving first, not taking. And we believe in helping others before helping ourselves. So, what is this month a little bit special? It's like the other years, we are co-organizing the Startup Europe Week in Luxembourg. And the aim of Startup Europe Week is to focus on supporting local entrepreneurs, and no matter where they are and where they come from. And how does Startup Europe Week intend to do this? Is by organizing events during 1 week in the year in order to showcase the local ecosystem, so that you, if you're already operating or would like to operate, let's say here in Luxembourg, you get an insight of the landscape. And that is the aim of Startup Europe Week. So without further ado, I would like to thank Philippe LINSTER from the House of Startups, commonly called HoST, who has joined us. Hello, Philip.
Hey, Steve. Thank you for inviting me to Startup Grind.
So you're more than welcome. So in order to get it off and so that we can cover a little bit in 20 next minutes what the landscape in Luxembourg, could you just, for those who eventually do not know what the HoST is, in a nutshell, tell us what is the HoST?
Of course. So yeah, the House of Startups. So for those who haven't been here, I really invite you to come by, to step by if you're in Luxembourg. So yeah, the House of Startups is a really big building in the city of Luxembourg. So it's really in the heart of our capital. It's a building, a quite big one, 6,000 square meters, over 5 floors, where we call ourselves a campus of innovation. What's really important to understand for the House of Startups is we're not directly an incubator, so we do not lease or we do not offer services directly for startups, but we have 4 different incubators and accelerators in our community. So what's the goal behind this, having so many different incubators in the building, is we have a very diverse community in the building. To give you a rough number, we have around 170 startups incubated at the House of Startups. In general, at Luxembourg, we say we have around 600 startups at the moment, an ecosystem which is really fast growing in the last years. So you can tell that we have around 1/4, 1/3 of the startups in Luxembourg. They are based at the House of Startups. So yeah, 4 different incubators. I'm sure we're going to go into much more detail during the call with our community. But yeah, we are building for every startup. We try to help them, put them into connection with corporate business angels, VCs, research institutes, to get fundraising, to get help from the state. So we do everything what we can do to help grow and develop our national startups. You're on mute, Steve. I cannot hear you.
I was so overwhelmed with what you just have said, so I forgot to unmute myself.
No problem.
No, and the idea of House of Startups, I mean, you told us in a nutshell what it is now, but how did it come up? How did the idea of the House of Startups develop?
That's an excellent question, Steve. So in Luxembourg, let's say the government started in 2013, 2014, when there was the new government coalition. They started talking about becoming a startup nation. So this developing of our innovation ecosystem, of getting our economy more digitalized, was very important for our government. So that started in 2013, 2014. Until that moment, there was really one incubator which was really famous, and they will celebrate their 25 years next year. Is the Technoport. So it's an incubator based at the south of Luxembourg, really one of our key players too. And we really have an excellent collaboration also with Diego, with the head of the Technoport. So they were really concentrating on what's deep tech and the startups which were already existing. But when then in 2014, the government decided to invest more money and more resources in developing such an ecosystem, we, the Chamber of Commerce of Luxembourg, we asked ourselves, how could we possibly help in this initiative? And so we started asking ourselves the right question. We put ourselves together with the government, but also with other partners to set up this initiative. So it took a little bit more than until 2017 when the project was officially launched. So the House of Startups was set up in 2017. We completely 100% belong to the Chamber of Commerce, so it's an initiative by this structure. And we opened our doors in June 2018. So that was really a nice initiative. We have other big political partners on board. Of course, we have the city of Luxembourg because we are based in the capital of Luxembourg. We have the Ministry of Finance because we have a structure, an incubator, only the LOFT, the Luxembourg House of Financial Technology, which is only there for fintechs, which is quite a big pillar in Luxembourg. Of course, we have the Ministry of Environment, and all the other big corporates we have. So you always can see in Luxembourg, everything is evolving around PPPs, so these public-private partnerships. So normally the government has an idea, it defines the strategy. Of course, it doesn't define the strategy alone, it defines it with different chambers, with other really key actors of the ecosystem. And then we try to develop these partnerships, these ideas together with the private sector, because nothing can be done without the other. So you need the public forces, you need the public sector to have the buy-in, and then you can really launch great projects. So yeah, so that was the beginning, was the talk in 13-14, and then 17-18 the project was launched.
Thank you. And how was it received? I mean, it's always something a little bit special when the public is involved. And how was it received by, let's say, by the market? Because you mentioned very well that you did your homework in order to set it up and what is needed. But how was it received? Was it well received, or were eventually one or the other player which were a little bit hesitant and took a wait and see approach?
No, I think it was well received in that sense that most initiatives in Luxembourg, we talk to each other. So if we want to plan something new, we want to launch a new initiative, we talk to each other. What do you think? And so it was not that in 17 we had the House of Startups and nobody knew about it. So that's impossible. So at that time, there were already some incubators. I mentioned the Technoport, but there were also some others. What's very important is that we do not compete with each other. So the incubators we have, for instance, we have the Luxembourg City Incubator, which is more focusing on smart city. In the House of Startups, we also have the LOFT, the Luxembourg House of Financial Technology, which is focusing on fintech. We have Le Village, which is an acceleration structure of Crédit Agricole, which builds the bridges between France and Luxembourg for acceleration. Either French startups accelerate to Luxembourg or the other way around. And we also have the ICRA, which is the International Climate Finance Accelerator. So these are structures having programs which don't compete with other programs already existing. So I told you the Technoport, which is more deep tech. We have Paul Wirth Incube, which is an incubator of the company Paul Wirth, which is more focusing on Industry 4.0. You have NeoBuild, which is more sustainable construction. You have Tomorrow Street, which belongs to Vodafone, which is more about communication, procurement, 5G, 6G. You still have a lot of other incubators. We have around, again, we are a small country, we have around 15, 20 of these incubation structures, but everybody has a really well-defined goal and a sector of which it takes care, and it builds around its network and everything around this sector. But it's very important that we do not compete. And we know each other very well. So again, it's a small country. You always see the same people at the different events, but it's important because we know each other. Paths are short. We can contact each other very, very quickly. So in that sense, we didn't create something which was a competition to another thing. It was mainly to fill the gap. So from the partners, it was very well received. And also when we see at our occupancy rate, also from the point of view startups, there was a real need for that. And because we're almost full today, and we're having many success stories now getting growing in the last few years, even though we had this Corona crisis. So I think there was a need from every side, and I think it's a great thing we have it now.
Thank you. And now coming a little bit to the services where the House of Startups had when you started, and the ones you are offering now in between. How did you manage to change? Because I guess the service is also adapted to the needs of the market, and also the market changed. How did you go about that?
Yeah, I think the services at the beginning, we thought about how can we potentially help the startups, how can we potentially help the ecosystem. But at the beginning, also the team was really smaller. So at the beginning, House of Startups, we were maybe 2-3 people. Today we are almost 10. At the LCI, this is the Luxembourg City Incubator, has now 4 people. I know the Loft, the House of Financial Technology, they have, I think, around 10, 11, 12 people. Le Village has 2 people now. So you can see inside these different structures, we have now around between 30 and 40 people in the building which take care of these startups. So it's a really great thing. At the beginning, 4 years ago, there were maybe 10 to 15. So a lot of services developed over time. So I think the services did not change that much. I think we added a lot. So we, at the beginning, of course, we're an incubator. We tell ourselves how can we potentially help the startups. So of course we want to focus on the network we have already with the Chamber of Commerce, with the Ministry of Finance, with the City of Luxembourg. So these were already partners. But over the years, we developed also other networks. And again, we have a huge network in the different sectors of business angels, VCs, research institutes, Lux Innovation, which is our national research agency, which also helps the startups to get funding, public funding especially, challenge business plans. So over the years, we added a lot of people, which developed quite some new initiatives. So if you go inside the incubators, you have services which help directly the startups. So this goes from common workshops like about sales, fundraising, go-to-market, go international. This can be very broad depending on the maturity level of the different startups. You also have individual programs. So this is really, your startup is now in that stage. What are your needs? And then we try to find the right coach, the right expert, and the right entrepreneur who has some experience in this and who can potentially guide you in the right direction. What's really important about the House of Startups is the peer-to-peer learning. We have in the HoST startups which have already 70 employees, which is one of the biggest. And at one moment, you also have to leave because they're getting too big. Our building is not there to keep you for an indefinite amount of time. No, after 3-4 years, when you have grown to a certain level, we ask you also to leave the building to make place for another success stories like the one we asked to leave at a certain moment. But this peer-to-peer learning is really important. So we get new startups in, maybe 1 or 2 people, founders in the team, maybe clients, maybe no client yet, maybe an MVP, not sure for the moment. But they can talk to these startups which are already more advanced. So this peer-to-peer learning is important at every incubator. And because we have 4 incubators and so many startups, this peer-to-peer learning is even more important. Then, so this is more the service which is provided by the different incubators. Then we as House of Startups, we also provide services which are more to develop the ecosystem. So it's not directly for the startups, it's more indirectly, because when you have a better ecosystem, you also have a better environment where the startups can grow. So at the end of the day, everything is done for the startups. But what do we do at the House of Startups? So it's more, for instance, we have the LOIC, which is the Luxembourg Open Innovation Club. This is a network only for big corporates. So no startups. They are the biggest corporates of Luxembourg. And we try to help them with their innovation needs. And you don't only have to tell the startup and to coach the startups how to work with big corporates. Sometimes you also have to coach the big corporates how they can work with startups, because it's not at all the same procedures functioning. So and it's really, and we as House of Startups, I think we consider us as the perfect partner, because we are in between. As belonging to the Chamber of Commerce, we know all the big corporates, but as being the House of Startups, we know also the startups. So we can do the matchmaking, we can find the right initiatives and possible collaborations. We also have launched a podcast in Luxembourgish. This is done together with the Ministry of Education. So we have a podcast. We interview Luxembourgish startup people, and it's listened in the schools. So we want to inspire young talent. War for talent is present everywhere, at the government, at the bigger corporate, at the startups. So we need really good people. We need talented people. So that's why we have launched this podcast, that we can inspire people still at high school to maybe guide their studies and maybe join our ecosystem as a founder, as an employee later when they're ready to join. So again, we try to strengthen the ecosystem that at the end of the day we can help our startups.
Thank you very much. And now I'm picking a little bit the questions which are coming in. And dear viewer, when you have other questions or remarks, just shoot them in the chat or use the Q&A function. It is a little bit, that's all very interesting. And then how is it practically? Now, for example, let's go the journey of a founder. A founder, when is the best time she gets in contact with the host? Is it when she has already an idea, or when the idea has a little bit matured? When would be the best time to approach the host, or what would you suggest them to approach first before approaching the host?
That's a good question, because we get many requests from people maybe even too early contacting us, and of course we're guiding them towards the right structure. So still, I think what can help here is the networking, the coaching program at very early stage level. But I think you should be a little bit more advanced than just having an idea in your head. That's too early. I think anyway, you, and I hope you have a founder team, a diverse team, so people who are not the same than you. I think with all the successful startups we see here, a diverse founders team is essential. So having other people who have other skills than you is really key to success in every company, but even startups more. So I think you should work like it's like in the garage at your home. You should work on the business plan. You should talk to first potential clients. For that, you don't need to be at an incubator. So, and nobody takes away that work from you. So you have to do it yourself. So that's, I think, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to do the dirty work. And dirty work means going to people. You could be a potential client. What do you think of our solution? Do you really think you need that product or service? Would you be ready to pay for it? If yes, how much? That's a lot of back and forth, and this can take 3, 6, 9, 12 months before getting in touch with us, because you don't need to come here and don't forget, not everything is for free here. So if you come here, you have to pay a certain fee to rent the office. So it's not expensive, and the support you get behind is all for free. So the added value behind us it's really great. That's also why the startups are here. But still, when you are here a year, it can cost you 3, 4, 5,000 euros, depending on the needs for even one desk. If you have more people, then it's even more expensive. These are costs, and costs you should never forget as a startup or as any business. And do you really now need to pay these events, pay these costs to join us? Maybe it's even too early. If you have an idea and you have already some kind of a proof of concept, there's one structure I think which is really great in Luxembourg. We have NUCO. NUCO was always based, so you have nuco.lu, so don't hesitate to look it up on Google here in Luxembourg. They were based at the House of Startups. Now they are based at the House of Entrepreneurship on the Kirchberg in Luxembourg. They are an idea challenger. And how the name says it, they really try to challenge your idea. So it's even before you have created the company. So for having an idea, developing a business plan, you don't need a company. You don't need to set up a company because, again, setting up a company takes time, costs money. Of course, the cost different amount of money depending on the legal structure you choose. Still, it costs money. Do you really need to spend that money now? Maybe your idea isn't that good, and maybe you don't find customers. So you can maybe save that money for other stuff. So go to structures like NUCO and let them challenge your idea. Everything is for free. They have programs. They do not only take startups. They also take and challenge other companies. But at least they bring you on the right ways to ask the right questions. I think that's really important especially for people who have never been entrepreneurs before. They can really direct you in the right direction. They can put you in contact with other entrepreneurs. That's worth a lot. And then general advice is, don't think, I need to hide my idea because anyone is going to steal it and I need to protect my IP. When you think like that, you're never going to be an entrepreneur. Nobody did that. So you need to get out. You need to talk to people because you need feedback. You need feedback. Is this an idea which is really needed? Is somebody willing to pay for this? If you don't talk to people, you never find out. When you have done this work, and that can take time and it's not easy, then I think, and you really think, okay, I can have my potential first client somewhere. I have incorporated their feedback. So I have a minimum viable product, an MVP. I have it now. I think that's a good step to come to us, or in any incubator. It must not be the House of Startups, but any incubator in Luxembourg. That's the right moment because you get in touch with other startups. You can participate in the coaching programs. And that's the moment you already have some revenue streams, or you're just about to get revenue streams. So you also have some money to pay the costs which are related for being an incubator. So my advice is really talk as much to as many people you can encounter with your ideas. And don't hesitate. Talk to structures like NUCO, but talk to any possible clients. So I think that's the best. That's the most valuable feedback you can get. And when you're ready, when you think you can sell something, still the product is not perfect, but you think you're just about to having first clients, first traction, I think that can be the perfect moment, at least to get in touch with an incubator, to talk to them, which is the best incubator for your needs, and potentially you can decide joining one of them.
Thank you. And on the other hand, there's a question popping up, which is, okay, you have the company, you came, you are benefiting from the services from the host and the other players in the ecosystem, but you're in the host. And what's your feedback about a company being seen as or branded as a startup in order, as you just mentioned, Loic, in order to get away from this startup image? Is it then a company which can stay at the host, or where you would say, okay, then it's maybe a time to get out of the host and go into another structure for the services they are looking for?
Let's say that the word startup is also a lot misused, and still people, they are struggling to find one unique definition for startup. So what sometimes they tell it's something about the age, but I think also the age is a very complicated criteria. Why? Because you have some sectors where it makes sense to say a startup is younger than 5 years. But let's say industry or space where the product really needs to takes a lot of years to just have an MVP. it can take sometimes up to 10 years. So it would be unfair to just tell them less than 5 years. And sometimes also people tell Google or Apple, they still name them today a startup, but hey, they're the biggest company in the world. But so a lot of sometimes startup is also misused in terms of innovation. So a very innovative company can be still called a startup. In Luxembourg, we have Talkwalker. Of course, they were a startup, and they founded the company with 2 people at the Technoport. Today, there are more than 600. Still, we call them our most successful startup in Luxembourg, which they are. But is this still a startup with 600 people? So yeah, again, the term startup is also a lot misused in that sense. But which is also not a problem. We will not go around and see your startup, you're not, and then we kick you out. That's not if we think we can still help you, then we keep you in the buildings. We're not going to ask you, do you still consider yourself as a startup or not? I think what's important for us is, are you a young company? But I'm honest, we don't define young that much, because at the Luxembourg City Incubator, they are very, very early stage. So maybe they have just created a company. But at the fintech level, because you're working with banks, you're working with insurance, with the investment sector, you cannot be 1 year old. They will not take you serious. So of course, these startups are much older than the one at the other incubator. So that's why still you need to be young. What I mean by young is you cannot have a big company behind you which has 100% of the shares. So then you belong to that company and you're already like your subsidiary. So we consider you young because it's a new project with new founders. So that makes a lot of sense. Can be multiple entrepreneurs. We have done another project already before. Still, the company is young. The idea is young. We consider you a startup. A second criteria is the innovation. So again, innovation can be very broad. You can invent something which is really new, which will change the world. Of course, that's innovation at its pure. But you can also maybe improve something, digitize something, make it better, improve the process. That's also innovation, and that's important too. So that makes part of our building too. And the third criteria, I think it's really important for startups, is scalability. So once I have found my product, I have found customers, how easy is it for me to scale with this idea? Can I copy paste it to other countries, to other continents? Is this possible? Or is it like I have a bakery, I can only produce as many bread as my facility can produce? That's not scalable. You need to buy another bakery in another town. So that's for sure not a scalable business. But a lot of these software businesses, they are scalable. So this idea often they are scalable. So that's, I think, an important criteria. So let's say if you're still young, innovative, but on a broader level, like I explained, and you have a scalable idea, business model, then we will take you in the building and we will keep you. There are 2 ways of getting out of the house of startups. Either you failed, unfortunately, but it's part of the game. I think startup means a high risk involved, or you succeed. And succeed can also have different forms. Either you get bought by another company, so maybe they take you in. Either you are growing so fast that we don't have enough space at the house of startups, so you get out and you get to a new office. And stuff like this. So, but at any moment, after some time, you will leave anyway. Either because you failed, and of course we hope not, and we try to avoid it, and we try to help you. But not every innovative idea can have success, or because you succeeded in becoming an. You also should not also forget that startups does not mean always getting to doing an IPO or getting the biggest company of the world. A startup can become a normal company, like with 15, 20, 30 people, with a traditional SME, which maybe was not the goal at the beginning, but you don't know what's getting out of you. And if you're becoming an SME which is generating enough revenue and which has good employees, why not? This is a success too. So you should not always think about getting the richest man in the world or doing an IPO or having 700 people afterwards. You can become a nice company too, even if you don't do such a way.
Thank you. And I think now the last questions, which is a little bit belonging to the market, because I mean, when you are a Luxembourg company, the Luxembourg market per se is limited in, let's say, in scale, because I mean, we're a small country, which is normal, and you have only so many potential users, customers, clients. When a company is growing outside of Luxembourg, do you also see or offer assistance to them, or do you have partners who can offer them assistance?
Yeah, definitely. So you are right. Luxembourg as a single market is too small. You don't come here because you want to conquer Luxembourg and you will finish with that. That's impossible. But why do we attract so many international startups? Is because we are a gateway to Europe. So we are really based in the center. There's nothing more central than Luxembourg in Europe. When you're in Luxembourg, you can already access 3 countries, Belgium, Germany, and France, really, really fast. And don't forget that people here, we speak all the languages. So already we have 3 official languages with Luxembourgish, French, and German. English is as the main business language. So it's even easy to access the France, Germany, and Belgium just with the right people here. So that makes us a really nice soft landing platform for a startup in Europe. So I think it's very important that of course, our market is small compared to France, compared to Germany, compared to the US. But because we are such an open country, founding member of the European Union, all this stuff, you can get to all these countries really, really fast. And you have the high-skilled workforce here to do that. And you have the political and economic structure, and which helps us. Now to your question, who can potentially help you to go abroad? I think we at the House of Startups, we have something which is called the EU Tribe. It's a network of incubators and accelerators of the greater region. For those who are not living in Luxembourg or not living around, maybe the concept of the greater region is not known, but we have regions from our 3 neighboring countries which are really directly linked to Luxembourg. So you have the Wallonie, which is the region from Belgium, directly linked to Luxembourg. You have the Lorraine in France, and you have Saarland and Rheinland-Pfalz. These are 2 Bundesländer from Germany directly to the borders of Luxembourg. And together with Luxembourg, this region is called the Greater Region. So all these regions together. And we really work very close with these regions in terms of commuters. So every day people are coming here to Luxembourg to work, go back at night, but also in the business level, like a lot of corporates doing business with these regions. Vice versa, everybody's working together there. But since some years ago, the greater region concept is very important, but there was nothing happening on the startup level on the greater region. And we launched EU Tribe, which is a network of the innovation structures for the greater region. So today we have over 40 members, which are different incubators and accelerators of the greater region. And what do we do? So we know each other. The network is also already essential. So when there's a startup coming to its incubator, look, I want to accelerate towards France. How can you help me? Then we already have this network. We know structures there. We get in touch with them and we put them in touch with the startups, and then they can help them to accelerate. And so this network already is a huge added value we try to build for our incubators. And it's not only for Luxembourg, we also have the incubators at the other regions. So it's a very collaborative initiative we have set up there 3 years ago, and over 40 members, so there's a huge success. Another initiative I mentioned before at the beginning was Le Village, which is an accelerator based at House of Startups. It belongs to Crédit Agricole, the French banking group, which helps the Luxembourgish startup accelerate to France. And they have around 25, 30 Le Village already in France, so in every big city. So they can really open you the doors to France as a really big market. So of course, they decide who they let in their program. So that's their choice, but it's a huge gateway to get to France. And maybe also an initiative which is really, I think, important is the International Affairs Department of the Chamber of Commerce. So I told you we belong to the Chamber of Commerce, the House of Startups, and we have a very, very big department which is called the International Affairs. They have an initiative which is called Go International. So you can contact them, or we can help you to contact them, because it's our group, our friends, our colleagues. People specialized for every region, for the regions in Europe, but also in South America, North America, Asia, Africa. So they have the contacts there. So we organize on regular occasions. We organize missions, international trade missions to these countries. So some weeks before, we had a mission to Portugal. It was a state visit, even our Grand Duke. Now there will be, next week is VivaTech in Paris, a very big startup event. In 3 weeks is Collision, a mission from Luxembourg to Canada. So again, every month are happening trade missions, and our startups are a part of the Chamber of Commerce, are members of the Chamber of Commerce. And I mean all the startups in Luxembourg, not only Denmark, based at the House of Startups. And everybody is free to participate, and we even encourage them. So on a regular basis at the House of Startups, we organize workshops where we explain the startups. These are the missions now coming up in the next month. So if this is interesting for you, please subscribe, please come with us, and we will put you in contact with new potential partners. So a lot of ways to get in contact with other markets, and I think you just have to use the different resources which are available, but many structures will help you.
So, thank you very much, Philippe, for these insights on the local ecosystem. And last question at the end is, you gave us a great overview of the landscape of the ecosystem in Luxembourg. If you would have a magic wand, what would be something which you would you like to see happening, or eventually changing or adapting, if there's something like that?
Of course, there are always things. I think we're not perfect. I think we have great things to offer, but we're also still lacking some things. If I have this magic wand, I have really two things clear in my head. Also, we're asking the government to get such things, and it's not always easy, but I think it's important to get our ecosystem to the next step, to the next stage. I think it's more about the legal framework in Luxembourg. So you have stuff which is happening even in our neighboring countries, so even in other European countries. So it's nothing that only the US does, or only Israel does, or only China does. So other countries in Europe are doing them too. And maybe afterwards, when they have it and we don't have it, they have a competitive advantage over us of attracting especially non-European startups. So I think in that sense, we still have to some work to do. So what would be two concrete measures from my side, which I have this magic wand, is first of all is what we call the tax shelter. So this is more the investment side. So today, if you invest in the startup as a business angel, of course, you hope to make some money, but again, there's it's a high risk investment. So the risk of losing all of it or some of it is also very high. And you have in Belgium, you have a law which is called the tax shelter. In France, it's called Loi Modin, and in Germany, they call it the Invest scheme. And when there are different schemes but similar objectives, so the objective behind is when you invest in the startups, you can deduct this money from your tax declaration. So already you get some money back from the state as a loss on your tax declaration, which I think is a good thing, because it's some kind of support from the government to investors. And don't forget, already today we have a very lively business angel network. But imagine there would be even this incentive more from the government. I think there would even more money which will go not to real estate in Luxembourg, or not to other investments which are more safe. If you would induce these investments to go to high risk, to startups, and there's this political incentive, I think there would even be more private money going to the startup ecosystem. And more money means more development, more employees, more economy. So there's also an incentive for the government, because if the startups grow, if they develop, there will be more working places, will be more winning, so more taxes also for the government. So normally at the end of the day, it's a win-win situation. Of course, they have to pay taxes as government because it's an incentive. But at the end of the day, it should help the ecosystem, which will give us better companies and which will give us more revenue streams also for the state. And other countries did prove that. So it's something we are asking a lot of time. I think the government will do it at one moment, but still, we haven't done it. Now there was COVID, now it's the war in Ukraine. Of course, the state has to spend a lot of money on that. It's not easy for them, but we are wishing for them. That's the first measure. That's more for the investment side. Of course, the startups, they will profit from it because more money is coming to their business. But also I want to say maybe another procedure which is helping the startups directly is called an employee stock option system. What is it? Just very briefly, it's war for talent is so big today. You are looking for engineers and IT guys, and not only startups are looking for them. Everybody is looking for them. Big companies, the state, the startups. What's the disadvantage for startups? They don't have the same resources, the same financial resources than big companies or the state. They cannot pay the same big salaries. That's impossible. They are still at early stage. So what can they do? They can sell their vision. They can sell their purpose. And they can not only sell it by telling them, but they can also sell this purpose by giving them like options on their shares. So that means, and all of the big American companies, they did this. PayPal, Facebook, Apple, Google. So these first employees, they were not founders, they were not investors, they were their first employees. They got options on shares. So they got, when they got hired by the startup, they got a price fixed at the moment of hiring that they could maybe buy shares in 5 years. So imagine your startups grows and grows and grows and grows. So in 5 years, the share is worth much more than it was 5 years ago, but you can buy it at the price which was fixed 5 years ago. So there's a lot of incentive for the employee to come, because he believes in you. He believes in the vision, the purpose, the mission. So he believes also in the added value that at the end of the day, in 5 years, it will pay off. What's the problem today? The fiscal legal framework in Luxembourg, but in many other countries too, it will tax your stock options on a fictive value. So that means you already will be taxed on something you haven't cashed out. And with the risk that even already it's very difficult to value a startup, because it's a business maybe which is not existing anywhere else. So you have no comparatives. And imagine you get taxed in 2 years, and in 3 years, the startup is not existing anymore because it failed. And at the end of the day, it failed. So you even had to pay money. You had to pay taxes on the stock options, which at the end of the day, you could not even cash out something. So we are asking for a system which is more fair. You should pay taxes when you do and when you sell them. That's normal. You earn some money, so you should pay taxes. But you should not pay taxes on a fictive amount of value. That makes no sense, because it's too much risk, and afterwards you have paid taxes and you haven't even earned something because the startups failed anyway. So I think that would be a great tool for startups to hire talent, because maybe the salary cannot be that big, but in combination with some stock options and with the seller and the employees believing in these startups, it can be worth much more. And one last thing with that measures, these people, they will not take the money and stop working. Elon Musk, he was the guy who invested in Facebook and PayPal. Peter Thiel too. They got out millions, maybe billions. They started new businesses. They invested in other startups. So again, the return on invest for the government is huge, because maybe some of them will retire and live with that money. But most of them will stay entrepreneurs, and they will invest in other businesses. They will create new business because now they have the pocket money to do that, because they earn some nice money. So again, it's a return on the economy too, and there is also a really interesting stake for the government.
Great. Thank you very much, Philip, for these closing words. And thank you, dear viewer, for having joined us. And as usual, it will be available soon. And we wish you a good continuation of the day. And thank you, Philip. Bye.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Salvatore.